Hello, Arne.
Hello, how are you? Can you hear me?
Are you able to hear?
I can hear you, yes. Can you hear me? It's, uh, break- it's breaking up pretty bad. I noticed that you're speaking, but I can only hear very few, just like a sound. Here, can you hear me now? So I can see Anand and I can see the name of Gagan, but I can only hear. So can you hear me? Please show me a thumbs up. Great, good. That's what we need, right? That's excellent. And now I can see Gagan as well. And I know that I can eventually share my screen, right? So I can show my presentation. I cannot go there. It's only like sound snippets that I hear. So if you can give me a sign or tell me when to start, it's so okay. So am I visible and audible to everyone that's supposed to be here? Okay. So because I only saw three here, so I will start then, and very welcome to this session on building blocks for self-organization. Sometimes I talk about coaching teams to self-organization. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna walk through this, and I'm gonna do some quoting in the beginning. What Henry Ford said, one of the good things he said. Not all good things he said though. Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is a process, and working together is a success. And self-organization is very much about working together. So today I'm going to talk about what is self-organization. I'm going to talk about why we want it, give some ideas on prerequisites, talk about a possible map to follow to get to self-organization, and then also mention some enablers for self-organization, and towards the end, some tools that we can use to support self-organizing teams and help them to become even more self-organized. So first of all, let's talk about what self-organization is. And what I did when I asked myself this question, I checked a couple of places. So one answer I found in Encyclopedia of Ecology from 2008, where it says that self-organization is the emergence of pattern and order in a system by internal processes rather than external constraints or forces. So what I get out of this is patterns, and I also get that it comes from within, and that it may not be enough to have external constraints or forces. It may not be enough to tell us to become self-organized. So what I also know is that in the Scrum Guide, self-organization is mentioned. And the Scrum Guide says that Scrum teams are self-organizing and cross-functional. It also says that self-organizing teams choose how best to accomplish their work rather than being directed by others outside the team. So in order to be able to self-organize, we probably need to have some direction and then being given a lot of freedom. And we're going to talk about that. So first, what I would like to do, and I will stop sharing my my screen for a short time, and I will try to hopefully inspire you to write in the chat. So why would anyone want to self-organize? What are benefits, possible benefits from self-organization? What would you say? I see that there has been some writing already. So increases proactive nature, time saving, reduced conflicts, empowerment, high performance, productivity. What does it more? Yeah, ownership of work, productivity again, creativity and innovation. And that's something that we wish for a lot of times. And creativity and innovation usually is better if we bring people together, not only having one person. So many people or more people are usually more creative and innovative in a self-organized team. So improved speed, energy, and innovation. So there are a lot of possible ideas behind why we want to self-organize. And what I have written, you will recognize from what I just read. So some organizations, they say that we want higher quality. So if we bring skilled people together and we ask them to self-organize, we believe that we will get higher quality. The same goes for faster results, higher value, because we may be able to create even higher value if we work together and self-organized than if we're only depending on people that are directed from the outside. And sometimes we want to self-organize because multiple skills are needed. And if multiple skills are needed, it's not always possible to have someone outside directing how these individuals should work together. It's usually much better to ask them to think about what they're supposed to do and then figure it out by themselves. So there are multiple reasons why we would want to self-organize. And then we may want to think a little about what are the building blocks or maybe the prerequisites for self-organization. Are there anything that we need to be able to self-organize? So maybe we need to think a lot, and maybe we need to think so our brains glow before we come up with it. I don't think we need to think that hard. What I have come up with after thinking for a while, not that long, but for a while, usually I compare with before. So what happened before we were able to get to self-organization? Or what is the state that we have right now where we want self-organization to happen? Well, there is probably someone, and usually an individual, who are organizing things. So if I'm that manager or product manager or project manager or whoever, what can I do? Well, I can get out of the way. I can leave room for self-organization. And that's one prerequisite. I don't think that's enough, though. I think that that's excellent if the one who is organizing gets out of the way. And then the team we're talking about, they should be possible. It should be possible for them to get into that space. So someone getting out of a space and someone else getting the support to get into that space. Because sometimes it's not only about someone stopping to organize from an outside point of view. Sometimes if we are members of a team, we may be so used to have someone else organizing the work for us, so that we need to practice self-organization. So therefore, support the team to get there in there and become self-organized is something that we really want to happen. And I believe that's a prerequisite as well. Then we may want to create some sort of map. And the map that we are creating, of course, has to do with the context we're in. So I'm not going to give you a map that works every time. I'm just going to talk about the concept of a map. What do we need to do to get to self-organization? And some things that you may want to think about is what is the capability of the team, and what to be fully self-organized. And I like to talk about capability rather than maturity, because most teams, they are capable and they can become even more capable. I'm not sure talking about maturity helps us getting into the right line of thinking. So if we talk about capability and growing capabilities, maybe we want to have some sort of model to look at. And two models that you may look at is one by Tuckman called Evolution of Team Dynamics. And then you have Susan Whelan's Integrated Model of Group Development, IMGD. Integrated Model of Group Development. What Evolution of Team Dynamics is about is different stages, moving from forming, where we meet and learn about goals and opportunities. We may not share very much knowledge because we may not trust each other. And remember this word trust, as well as I want you to remember the word pattern that I talked about before. We'll get back to those two words later on. And when we are forming, we have a strong desire for direction. The likelihood of self-organization to happen here is very low. And then the model from Tuckman talks about another phase called storming. Now, we probably have gotten to know each other within the team. All of a sudden, we feel that we can express our opinions on different things, like processes and standards and goals and solutions. And what we see in storming is that we see difference in opinions and some sort of conflict, not necessarily a bad conflict, but a conflict which we sometimes are not able to take away. Teams that get into storming, they realize that we cannot be having conflict around every single small issue that we are facing forever. So we probably need to get some norms how to deal with things. So norming is the next phase, where we find a team identity and some cohesiveness will develop. We will evolve new standards and new ways of working agreements, for example. Maybe we form or adopt informal roles within the group, within the team. And then when all of that is in place, that's when Bruce Tuckman talks about performing. you see for yourself what it says here: high degree of cooperation and interdependence. We achieve goals quite effectively and quite smoothly with a minimum of conflict. Of course, if you are in the forming stage, in the storming phase, or in the norming phase, you will perform as well. But you may not be as efficient as you are in a performing phase. So if we can support teams to go through these phases, they will be more likely to be able to self-organize. Norming is very much about self-organization. I'm going to talk about IMGD as well, Integrated Model of Group Development. Similar, also 4 phases. First, dependency and inclusion. Then counter dependency and fight. Then what do we have? We have trust and structure. We see this word trust again. Norms and working agreements could be similar as structure. We get cooperation in this phase. And what is interesting in this model, according to me, is that in the counter-dependency and fight phase, we will have disagreements and we will have conflict. And if we are able to sort out that, we will reach trust. If we have a disagreement and we sort it out, we know that we are capable people and we can sort it out in the future as well. So we build trust. And then this model also talks about work and productivity, and that's where we want to be. Productivity, effectiveness, we are working towards goals, we are performing tasks, and then eventually we may terminate or not, we may continue. So either of these models or any other model around group dynamics or team dynamics or group development may be good to have as a basis for our understanding how we best can support a team to become self-organized. What is interesting is that if you take a look at the 2 axes here, the horizontal axis, which is blue, in the beginning, it's much focus on leader and relations. And what we are aiming for is to get to a stage where we focus on work and results. And then, of course, we are interested in increasing our productivity. When I asked, why do we want self-organization? I had the idea that increased productivity was a good reason, and some of you in the chat had the same as well. And while I'm thinking about the chat, I need to tell you that while I'm sharing my screen, I'm not able to see the questions in the chat. So I will go back and take a look at them from time to time. And my plan is to give plenty of room for questions towards the end. So when we take a look at productivity, when we go from dependency and inclusion to counter-dependency and fight, we may need to expect lower productivity. And then the idea is then that when we get into trust and structure and work and productivity, our productivity goes up as well. That's the idea, and that's the hope that we have. So when you take a look at these models, you may see that you can use them and identify blockers. So I've done the same, and I have identified a couple of blockers when it comes to storming from the Tuckman model. So I'll talk a little about that, and then I'll take a look at the chat. I'll ask you to think about enablers, and then I'll talk about enablers and tools. So let me see. Okay, so blockers. Well, there are different types of storming, and it's good to be aware and maybe be able to be proactive to deal with the different types of storming that you may encounter. So, of course, negativity, continuous criticism of team activities. I'm sure that you have been in situations where people have questioned many of the events or meetings that we're having, team activities. Oh, why do we need to do this? Oh, why do we need to do this? I rather keep on working because we're here to build a product. We're not here to reflect upon how we're doing. That only takes time. Typical negativity, dissatisfaction, and that could be with anything or everything. So I'm not satisfied with the chair I'm sitting on right now, and to mention it, I would rather have a different desk than the one I'm sitting with, and the work hours, etc., etc. You can imagine how that can go on. Hostility. Sometimes we are not able to behave in ways that we want to behave, and sometimes we are behaving in ways that are considered to be hostile. And I plead guilty to these things. Sometimes I'm considered to be aggressive. Sometimes I'm considered to be argumentative. And sometimes I know I may even be perceived as threatening. And of course, that's not what people usually want. So if we see these things, if we see negativity, if we see dissatisfaction, if we see hostility, let's do something about it. And if we think in advance, we may be able to even avoid it happening by being proactive. Storming could also be in the form of crisis mode. So we are very high pressure on the team, very short to the next deadline, and a lot of bugs getting into the software. So the team operating style is like this: crisis mode when things happen a lot, and we have different crises. And I almost got into a crisis mode right now because my phone kept ringing, and that was the fixed phone that I wasn't able to turn off. So hopefully they stop ringing. What we want here, try to get out of crisis mode and have teams coming together and honestly confront the issues, not act like we are in a rush all the time. Because if we keep on being in the crisis mode, we may never feel that we get to a rest. We may never feel that we're able to breathe. And then shooting down ideas. In a team that is really high productive, we usually have the atmosphere of yes and, so that we build upon each other's ideas rather than having the atmosphere of yes but. So shooting down ideas, so easy and so not worth it, because that's usually not the way we get further. So look out for these things, these kind of storming: negativity, dissatisfaction, hostility, crisis mode, shooting down ideas. And if we know that these things can happen, or other things, well, let's think a little about what can we do about avoiding them. How can we be proactive so that we never get into these kind of stormings? Easier said than done, of course. So I'm going to take a look at the chat, and what I should have told you earlier on, but I can tell you now, is that when I share my screen, you can double click that video stream and see more of what I can do. It says here in the chat a few seconds ago, click twice on screen to maximize. That could be something. So What I would like to ask you to do is to think about what are possible enablers for self-organization. What do we need to do in order to enable self-organization? So the models that I talked about are well, in order for a team to go through the different phases in these models, they usually need to spend time together. So it's more about long-living teams. Then, of course, we may need to define long-living. And I'm talking about time frames of up to 6 months and longer, probably. If it's shorter than 6 months, we may not even be helped by these models. So I see here a couple of suggestions: enablers for self-organization, empower teams, trust your team, that word again, collaboration, environment of trust, allow people to make mistakes. Yeah, because it's hard to come up with a perfect way of working without trying different things. And some of the things that we try, they may not work. So allow ourselves to try out different things. Because if we try and we fail, then we learn. So that's a good idea. Empower teams, constant communication. Yes, communication definitely. Give more freedom, and yes, empower teams, coach the teams and coach individuals. It's good to have empathy for the individuals and for the entire team as well. Empower the team, cross-training among members. So let's talk about it. Let's train ourselves and use that as an enabler. Good collaboration and good coordination. When the team has complete involvement in completing stories and would not complete them, blaming on other works, where would that blocker fit in? Let me see. When the team has complete involvement in completing stories and we would not complete them, blaming on other works. Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. What kind of blocker that is? It's probably the blocker of not taking full responsibility, and sometimes it's a matter of maybe we don't have enough competence within the team so that we are dependent on others. One of the things that I had on my list why self-organization was about when we had multiple skills needed. So if we can get all of those skills into a team, that's not always possible, but then we're better off. And if we cannot, then we may be dependent on others. And if we feel full responsibility, we will not settle with doing only our part, but we will also think in a wider terms, involving those that we are dependent on as well, and trying to fix that interface in the long run. What can we do so that we don't end up in this situation blaming others for not being able to finish our work? That was a very long answer. Working agreements is something that we can have. Cross-functional teams, yes, etc. So many good suggestions. Feel safe environment and feel safe. I'm going to get back to that. And create a better safe environment. So I'm going to share my screen again and show what I listed with help of others when it comes to enablers of self-organization. And you may recognize a number of these. So what I think are enablers is align values. Talk about the values that we have and try to align them and have discussions around them. working agreement. How do we treat each other? What do we do if this happens, if that happens? And be careful. I'm not suggesting that you should have a 125 item working agreement. I rather suggest that you have like 5 items in your working agreement. Coaching and support. I believe that one great enabler for self-organization is an inspiring vision. And in this case, it could be an inspiring vision for our company, and it should definitely be an inspiring vision for the product we're building. So product vision, shared and challenging goals. So if we share the same goals and they are challenging, then we may be able to do a great job together. If we have shared goals but they're not challenging, we may not try as hard and we may not work as productively. Try not to rush. Try to be consistent, and I also have safe environment as an enabler. So I'm going to continue talking about these things. And one thing I'll talk about is this. This is results of investigations or research within Google. A couple of years ago, I think it was like in 2011 or 2012, they started asking themselves, how come that some of our teams are even more efficient and productive than the other teams? What is the secret sauce? And they came up with 5 things after a long period of time. So it took them several years to realize this. And what is on top is psychological safety. And their elaboration on it is that team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. Other people have talked about psychological safety, and they say similar things. What they said at Google was also dependability. So if I'm a team member, if there is a dependability, that means that other team members, they depend upon me doing what I say I do and doing things on time and meeting the bar for excellence that we have. In this case, it was Google's high bar for excellence. Then also structure and clarity, meaning and impact are things that they identified as enablers for self-organization or for good teamwork. And meaning sometimes also is translated to purpose. And when I say purpose, I know that that's one of 3 things that a professor in Oslo in Norway, Anders Dyrsvik, has identified as internal drivers, not external, intrinsic, not extrinsic. What is driving individuals? And he identified 3 very common. Purpose, like this, work is personally important to team members. It fits with my values, what we're doing, what this product is about. Purpose, mastery to become good at what I'm doing, and autonomy. And autonomy is what we're talking about today with a self-organized team. So many people have the intrinsic drivers of purpose, mastery, and autonomy. There are others as well. So what I'm going to talk a little about now are some tools that you may use to help teams become more self-organized, that teams themselves can use to understand what they can do to become more self-organized. So one thing is to ask, how can we foster psychological safety in our teams? So here are a couple of things that people have come up with ideas to demonstrate engagement, show understanding, be inclusive in interpersonal settings, allow more people than you may feel to be included in the discussions, be inclusive in decision making. So in a great team, in a self-organized team, we involve all team members in this decision making, and show confidence and conviction without appearing inflexible. So I have to work with that because I tend to appear inflexible from time to time. So that's something that I need to work on, and maybe other people as well. I will make sure that I, in some way, show you the sources that I have. This is a short link to where you can read more about this, and I'll make sure that this is in some way or another gathered. I will write about this after the session, maybe not today, but in a few days on LinkedIn, and give some references as well. Okay, so here is something that you can do. This is called Team Effectiveness Discussion Guide. When it comes to psychological safety. And here is a list, short list, signs that your team needs to improve psychological safety. We have a fear of asking or giving for constructive feedback. There is hesitance around expressing divergent ideas, or sometimes feeling, I don't want to ask this silly questions. And what you can ask yourself, if you're a Scrum Master or a coach, do all team members feel comfortable brainstorming in front of each other? If not, then you may do something about it. Do all team members feel they can fail openly, or will they feel shunned doing that? So those are some things that you can ask yourself. Psychological safety. I wish we could create it just like that by snapping our fingers, but we are not always able to do that. So here are a couple of suggestions that you can use. This comes from an article in Harvard Business Review, and I will show the title of the article towards the bottom here. So first, approach conflict as a collaborator, not an adver. This is the problem, being born in Sweden, trying to speak a non-native language. Sometimes it's hard to pronounce. Adversary. So approach conflict as a collaborator, not an adversary. Speak human to human. Sometimes, yeah, we may not realize it, but sometimes we need to remind ourselves that we are actually all humans. Anticipate reactions and plan counter moves. And remember what it said first, collaborator. So counter moves is to help people understand your view, not necessarily to argue in the opposite direction, because then you would very much work as an adversary. Replace blame with curiosity. So I have next to me on my wall, I have a printout, and hopefully you can see that. It says here, that's interesting. Tell me more. Or that's interesting. Why would you say that? Or why would you do that? Or why would you ask that? So this is to remind myself that instead of blaming people, try to be curious about it. And I need to practice a lot on doing that. Ask for feedback on delivery. Right away, when you deliver something, ask for feedback right away. How did this work this time? Etc. Because then we usually get honest answers. And then find different ways of measuring psychological safety. All of this is from an article in Harvard Business Review from a couple of years ago. High-performing teams need psychological safety. Here's how to create it. So this may help you a lot or a little. Speak human to human, anticipate reactions, and counter moves. Those are things that I'm going to talk a little about. So I have a few minutes left before I'm going to allow you to ask questions. So speak human to human. Just like me is one thing that you can do. Like, this person is a father just like me. This person is working from home right now just like me, etc., etc., etc. Speak human to human. This person has beliefs, perspectives, and opinions just like me. This person has hopes, anxieties, and vulnerabilities just like me. And you can go on forever thinking in these terms. This person has friends, family, and perhaps children who love them just like me. This person wants to feel respected, appreciated, and competent just like me. And of course, you should think about things that is true for me, for you, when you say just like me. So I personally want to feel respected, appreciated, and competent. And I believe other people want that as well. This person wishes for peace, joy, and happiness just like me. And then also think about anticipate reactions and plan counter moves. So, for example, when you're presenting something, what are my main points? What are 3 ways my listeners are likely to respond? And maybe how will I respond to each of those scenarios? So when you are in discussions, think about what are your main points, what are 3 ways your listeners are likely to respond, and how will I respond to each of those scenarios? This is a way of preparing a conversation, and sometimes we need to have tough conversations. So what I suggest that you can do as a practice after the gathering, when you have some time and you can sit down for yourself and reflect, think about a conversation that you are about to have, or maybe you recently had, and identify your main points. Think about 3 ways your listeners or listener, could be only one, are likely to respond, and then how you will respond to each of those scenarios. This is something that can help you. If you are a team member, this can help you in the next conversation within the team. If you are a Scrum Master or a coach of a self-organized team, it may help team members if you prepare in this way. I'm going to mention a couple of other things that are a little tangential. The CDE model from the HD Institute, it talks about containers, differences, and exchange. So a container can be a team. And within the team, what kind of differences do we have? And what kind of exchange do we have within the team, and also between my team and other teams? If you can change something, maybe you can move to a situation where it's easier to become self-organized. Also, I mentioned one word quite early, and that was the word pattern. There are a set of people called the Scrum Patterns Group, including Jeff Sutherland, including James Coplien, that have identified many patterns for good implementation of Scrum. And if you if you go to a website called Scrumbook in one word, .org, you will find a collection of all of those patterns. You can also buy the book. Unfortunately, I don't get any royalties if you buy the book. And in that book, out of the 94 Scrum patterns, I picked 4 that talks about self-organization. And the top one is maybe obvious because that pattern is called self-organizing team. And that's a very good pattern for good implementation of Scrum. And you see that for that pattern and for the other green one, autonomous team, there are 2 stars. And that means that that's the highest level of confidence that they have of the patterns. There is one pattern called fertile soil, 1 confidence star, and then there is one pattern of community of trust. No confidence star. That doesn't mean that the pattern is lousy. It means that it hasn't been observed that much. It's still valid, and those people in the Scrum Patterns group, they highly recommend for teams to try it out. So these are a couple of things that you can take a look at also further on in understanding self-organization. And then I want to mention a set of facilitation techniques that I find very, very helpful. They're called liberating structures, and you see that liberatingstructures.com, you can find them. There are a list of 33 liberating structures, and they are, it's a very inviting community, very supportive community. And there is ongoing work to identify even more liberating structures. And the subtitle is Involving and Unleashing Everyone. So that's good for self-organizing teams. I mentioned a couple that I find useful. 1, 2, 4, all. If we want to find a solution or suggested solutions for a problem, we can work individually for 1 minute to think about possible solutions, and then pairwise for 2 minutes comparing and maybe generating even more, and then for 4 minutes bringing 2 pairs together and work in a foursome, and then everyone together after a while. That's one way of involving everyone and hopefully unleashing everyone as well. Other liberating structures that I believe are good to use in and support self-organizing teams with are impromptu networking, min specs, 15% solutions, and 25-10 crowdsourcing. I will not talk very much more about that. Instead, I suggest that you, for your personal benefit, create some sort of graphic organizer. It could be a piece of paper that you divide into 3 parts, or you just write down on any piece of paper one thing that you learned from this presentation, one thing that you want to investigate even further, and one thing that you want to try at work. This is one way of trying to reinforce what I've talked about, and also have you reflecting a little about what did you actually hear, and what you want to investigate of that. What did I learn? What do I want to investigate? And what do I want to try at work? So let me just see here. Yes, it says questions. So I'm gonna quickly show the last slide, which is my thank you slide, but that doesn't mean that it ends. I'm just gonna quickly show it. If you wanna take a screenshot, or if you want to notice my contact details, please do that. And then I will very shortly stop sharing my screen. Most of this is also available in the speaker profile in Hopin. And now I will stop sharing my screen and allow you to ask questions.
Thank you, Varne, for such a wonderful session. I hope you're able to hear me correctly now.
Yes.
Great. There are few questions from the chat that I collected for you. So one of the questions that keep coming like 3 to 4 times is, in a self-organized team, will a Scrum Master roles be redundant?
So a Scrum Master have different responsibilities. One responsibility of a Scrum Master is to be of service to the development team. And if I'm really good, or you're really good Scrum Master, then maybe we are able to coach and support the development team to not need all of that service. But that's only one part. A Scrum Master is also responsible of being of service to the product owner. And a Scrum Master is responsible of being of service to the organization. And the last part is often forgotten. So what I see a lot of times is that the amount of time that I need to spend on working with a team, maybe a lot of effort in the beginning, but that will probably go down over time. Probably not to zero. Similar for working with a product owner, going down over time. In the beginning, when we introduce Scrum, maybe I work a lot with the organization, but only for a short time. Then I don't have time to look at the organization because I'm supporting the team and the product owner. And then over time, the amount of effort put on the organization may be more. And so a team may be able to deal with operate without the Scrum Master, but they may not want to get totally rid of the Scrum Master.
Thank you. Wonderfully put. Another question that we have is, when you were showing the model of forming, performing, norming, performing, forming,
Yes.
there was one question that is this model work for any type of teams, be it a short-living team or be it a long-living team?
So I shortly addressed that before, and there are, we need to remember that most models are useful and also useful in different contexts, and all models are wrong because it's not an exact model of reality. Then it would be reality. So there are simplifications. I believe that these kind of models, when we talk about team capabilities improving over time, you need to have the team work together for a while. And then what is for a while? Well, in my mind, it's probably close to 6 months and longer. Otherwise, you may not see all the changes, depending a little on how much you work on these things or not. So my favorite answer, but I gave you some elaboration first, it depends.
Okay. One more question we have is, if a team is working for more than 5 years, is there a possibility that the team is not at a performing stage?
Well, possibly, likely, no, but possibly yes. And I mean, if no one in the team knows about such a model and have it as a reference point, and there is no one outside poking at the team and trying to support them in any way, of course it's possible. On the other hand, if we work for 5 years and we don't notice that we are moving in any better direction, we probably get tired of working together. So the likelihood is very low, I would say.
And another interesting question that come up is, can a team move back from performing to storming?
That's an excellent question, and that's getting into details with these models. If you have a team, now I'm gonna show you an illustration of a team with different individuals on the team. This is not very respectful, but let's say we have, how many do I have here? 6 team members. if we work together, we can expect to move through these phases. If we take away one team member, then there is a difference. Remember this containers and differences and the communication in between. Now all of a sudden we change the container, so the team is different. And if we go back to the earlier situation and we add something, we add a team member, that's also a difference. So what you can expect is to move to earlier stages again, but probably it will not take you as long time the second time around or the third time around to move through the phases. And you can expect a change in productivity if you reform the team. Yes.
Okay. Another question from Anand comes up. The self-organization does not happen in isolation. So how self-organized they are with respect to internal, external influences or disruptions and changes?
My thoughts on this is what I thought about in the beginning, that someone who are organizing needs to kind of take a step away and give room for the development team to the team to self-organize, and then the team members together, they need to take a step into that space that was freed. So I fully agree, it doesn't happen in isolation, and the internal external influences, disruptions, changes, the CDE model is interesting from that perspective as well. And if someone is taking a step away, the team is able to step into this space. They still need some support, and they may be able to do it themselves. And but the Scrum Master or a coach may be able to support them getting into self-organization faster than if it's all up to them. Of course, it's possible to do without the Scrum Master, without a coach.
Great. Satu, we have already answered that question regarding the Scrum Master being needed. We'll take another one question coming from Naveen. When we are in self-organized teams, sometimes few of the team members get demotivated or does not support the team members. How do we motivate them?
Yeah, and I talked before about intrinsic motivators or drivers. And intrinsic motivators are those that I have within myself. There are extrinsic drivers as well, and I usually call them carrot and stick. So carrot is me getting higher salary. That helps to some extent, but when it comes to knowledge work, that doesn't always help. So how much do you need to pay me to be really, really, really creative or innovative? I don't think I will be able to be more creative or innovative just because I get higher payment. I will try harder, yes, but I'm not sure that will work. So look at those inner drivers and think about, are there others as well? And then try to figure out for these individuals, what are their drivers? There is an excellent exercise that comes from, it's based by thinking from Jürgen Appelo, who wrote Management 3.0, that book. And the exercise I'm thinking about is moving motivators. And there is a set of 10 motivators that you can write down for yourself, and you can think about which is biggest for me, which is driving me most. And then moving means that if you have a change in a situation, how will that affect my motivators? But the first part, just thinking about what is driving me, and for a Scrum Master or a coach, understanding what is driving the single individuals. That way it may be easier to get them into to be more motivated and even be proactive and avoid this happening. And at least have an inspiring product vision, I would say.
Thank you for that answer. In the interest of time, I think we have just space for one more question.
I see one comment which tells me that Manonit knows like I do about these drivers. It says, but pay enough so that employee is not thinking of money. Yes, pay enough so that that issue gets off the table. Excellent. Excellent. Otherwise, it doesn't really work to think in that way. Sorry.
Great. One more question we can take from Sandesh is if there is a champion or a hero in the team, that seems to be a bad for the team. How do we handle that person?
So I believe that it's really, really good to have dialogues and talk about things. So that's me thinking in terms of how can I be proactive, and yeah, have the team members talk about these things early on, maybe involve this in our working agreements or our values, etc. And then think about the fact that we want teams to be individuals that form together, having a joint goal, the same goal. And if we have the same goal, if it's enough to have one hero to reach the goal, then it's better for the rest of us to do something else. So, and usually in a team, all of us together are smarter than the single smartest individual. So even if we have a hero, a very competent team member may benefit from having other people around her as well, so that we all together become more efficient. And that's good for the hero as well. So discussions and understanding that teamwork is usually good for everyone.
Totally agree that. So that's the end of the session, guys. There are other sessions that starting in a minute. You guys can move on from there. And thanks a lot, Arne, for such a wonderful session.
You're welcome, and thank you all for attending. I really appreciate all the questions and being given the opportunity to present. Thank you very much.
Thank you.